My name is Maya Caldwell, and I am 31 years old. And 7 months ago, I gave birth to my daughter, Emma, in a hospital room with my mother and my best friend beside me, and nobody else. Her father was not there. He has not met her. That is not an accident, and it is not the result of a dramatic falling out or a long, complicated unraveling. It is the result of 9 words he said at a kitchen table on a Sunday evening when I was 9 weeks pregnant and had just shown him the ultrasound image I had been carrying in my wallet since the appointment 3 days earlier. He said, "I need a son, not another daughter." I want to be precise about how he said it, because the how matters as much as the what. He did not say it in the voice of a man who is expressing a casual preference in the way that people sometimes express casual preferences and then catch themselves and apologize for the smallness of the thought. He said it in the voice of a man stating a requirement, the voice he used when he was communicating something he believed to be a reasonable position that he expected me to understand and take seriously. I need a son, not another daughter. Our daughter Ava was asleep down the hall. She was 3 years old. She had his eyes and my laugh and the specific fearlessness of a child who has been completely loved since the day she was born. I had believed she was completely loved by both of us. The sentence at the kitchen table was the moment I began revising that belief. I did not respond immediately. I took the ultrasound image back from where I had laid it on the table between us. I put it in my wallet. I said I was tired and I was going to bed. He said, "Okay." He went back to whatever he had been doing before I showed him the image. I lay in the dark in our bedroom for a long time that night, not crying, though the crying came later, thinking. The specific kind of thinking that happens when a sentence has arrived that you cannot unhear and that cannot be unmeant, and that has reorganized everything you thought you understood about the life you were living and the person you were living with. I thought about Ava, asleep down the hall. I thought about the baby at 9 weeks, still an ultrasound image in my wallet, already real to me in the way that pregnancies are real from the moment you know they exist. I thought about what it meant to be carrying a baby whose father had just told me, with the clarity of someone making a practical statement rather than expressing a feeling he was willing to examine, that what he needed was not this baby. I thought about what kind of woman I was going to be when I got up from that bed. I got up. I did not make any external moves that night or the following week, but I began from that Sunday evening the internal process of understanding what I now knew and deciding what I was going to do with it. I need to tell you about my marriage before the Sunday evening, because the Sunday evening makes more sense as the ending of something than as the beginning of something, if you understand what it was ending. David and I had been married for 5 years. We had met in our mid-20s through mutual friends at a work event and had moved through the relationship quickly in the way that relationships move when both people are at the age where they have been thinking about building something permanent and the other person appears at the right moment with enough of the right qualities to make the building feel possible. He was steady in the visible ways. He had a stable career in project management. He was organized and reliable in the logistics of domestic life. The bills were paid. The car was maintained. The kind of functional dependability that is easy to mistake for emotional presence when you are 26 and building something and trying to be optimistic about the foundation. I had known for several years that something was not quite right with the foundation, in a way I had not fully articulated to myself. Not a specific wrong thing, a quality of distance that David maintained in emotional conversations, a tendency to redirect toward practical solutions when what was needed was something more direct and feeling-oriented. A pattern of responses that, when I looked at them across 5 years, told a story about a man who had very specific ideas about what he wanted and a limited range of flexibility when what he encountered did not match those ideas. Ava had been born into that marriage. I had watched how David was with her and had told myself that what I was seeing was love expressed in a particular way, that not all fathers were demonstrative, that the consistency of his presence was its own form of care. I had told myself those things because I had needed them to be true. The Sunday evening told me they were not quite true enough. He had wanted a son before Ava was born. He had not said it the way he said it that Sunday evening. He had said it in the lighter way of someone expressing a mild preference, something like, "I have always imagined having a son," framed as a disclosure rather than a requirement. When Ava was born, he had held her and said the appropriate things, and I had believed we had moved past the preference into the reality of the daughter we had. We had not moved past it. The preference had been sitting in the marriage for 3 years, unexamined, and what the Sunday evening produced was the first time it came out in its actual form. Not a preference, a requirement that had not been met, stated in the voice of someone for whom this was a serious ongoing concern rather than a feeling that had been processed and released. I need a son, not another daughter. The week after the Sunday evening, I started paying attention differently. I want to tell you what paying attention differently produced, because the paying attention is the part that took the Sunday evening from being a wound I was carrying alone to being information I could act on. Over the following 3 weeks, I observed David with Ava with the specific, focused attention of someone who is no longer giving the benefit of the doubt automatically. I watched how he engaged with her in the evenings when he came home from work. I watched how he responded when she brought him things, the drawings and the small found objects, and the constant stream of discoveries that 3-year-olds produce when they are exploring the world and want to show it to someone. I watched him be fine, not warm, fine, the functional, consistent, dependable fine that I had been misreading as love for 3 years because I had wanted it to be love, and because I had never allowed myself to look at it without the softening lens of optimism I had maintained throughout the marriage. I called my mother 6 weeks after the Sunday evening. She had known something was wrong since Ava's birth, and had said nothing because I had not invited the conversation, and she had respected that. When I called, she listened to everything I told her without interrupting, which is the thing my mother does when she is choosing her words carefully. She said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I am working on a plan." She said, "What kind of plan?" I said, "The kind that means my daughters grow up in a home where they are wanted completely." My mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Whatever you need, I am here." That was the beginning of the logistical planning, the conversations with an attorney, the financial review of what I had and what I was building independently through my marketing consulting work, which I had been doing alongside my full-time job for 2 years, and which had been generating income I had kept in a separate account because something in me had been doing something like preparing without consciously calling it preparing. I was further along in my preparation than I had known. I want to be honest about the next 4 months because they were the most difficult of my life, and I do not want to describe them in a way that makes the difficulty invisible. I was pregnant. I was managing a pregnancy that my husband had greeted with a statement I could not move past. I was working full-time and building the consulting business and meeting with an attorney periodically and having conversations with my mother and trying to be fully present for Ava in the specific way she needed during a period when everything at home was quietly, invisibly changing. I had not told David I was leaving. I had not confronted him with the Sunday evening sentence or the months of paying attention that followed it. I had been advised by my attorney to complete the financial and legal preparation before any formal conversation, which was the appropriate sequence, even though maintaining the appearance of a functioning marriage during that period was the hardest thing I had done since Ava's birth. David, to his credit, or perhaps simply to the nature of his limited emotional engagement, did not appear to notice that anything had changed. He came home and asked the logistics questions and engaged with Ava in the fine, not warm way he always had, and discussed the pregnancy in the practical register he had adopted since the Sunday evening, and did not initiate any conversation about the sentence he had said or the silence it had produced in me. I delivered Ava her first sister at the end of September. I had not told David what the baby's gender was when I found out at 20 weeks. He had been in the room at the appointment and had heard the technician confirm it, and I had watched his face do the thing I had expected it to do, and had watched him compose himself and say appropriate things, and had noted both the reaction and the composure for what they told me. Emma was born at 7 pounds 4 ounces, with a voice that announced her arrival in the specific, decisive way that seemed, given everything, like exactly the right way for her to arrive. David was present at the delivery in the logistical sense. He was in the room, he held her, he said appropriate things. I watched him hold his second daughter, and I looked at his face, and I did not see the thing I needed to see. And I had stopped expecting to see it, but I wanted to note its absence for the record. My mother was also there. My best friend Kira was there. When the room was quiet and David had stepped out and it was just my mother and Kira and Emma and me, my mother held my hand and looked at Emma and said, "She is perfect." I said, "Yes, she is." 3 weeks later, I told David I was leaving. The conversation I had been preparing for happened on a Thursday evening after Ava was asleep and Emma was in the bassinet, and the house was quiet in the specific way that houses are quiet when something significant is about to be said in them. I sat across from David at the kitchen table, the same table where he had said the sentence 9 months earlier, and I told him that I was ending the marriage. I said it directly and without preamble because I had been rehearsing how to say it for months, and I had determined that directness was the only register that served either of us. He asked why. I said, "I think you know why." He said, "The things I said about the baby." I said, "Among other things, yes." He said, "Maya, I should not have said what I said." I said, "I know." I said, "You should not have meant what you meant, which is different." He was quiet. I said, "I have been paying attention to our marriage for the past 9 months with the specific attention of someone who is trying to understand what it actually is, rather than what she hoped it was." I said, "David, I cannot give our daughters a home where they are managed rather than loved completely." I said, "That is not a criticism of who you are. It is a statement about what our daughters need, and what I know you are not positioned to provide." He said, "I love my daughters." I said, "I believe you love them in the way you understand love to work." I said, "What I need for them is a version of being loved that you have not shown me you are capable of." He did not have a response to that because there was not an honest one available. The divorce was filed the following month. It was not contentious in the way some divorces are contentious, which I attributed less to goodwill than David's fundamental pragmatism, the same pragmatism that made him manage rather than love, that made the logistics of the divorce easier than the emotional landscape of a marriage that had never been honest about what it contained. He has visitation with Ava through the arrangement the court established, supervised visitation that I requested based on my concerns about his differential treatment of the girls, and that the court agreed to pending a longer evaluation. Emma is not yet part of the visitation arrangement because she is 7 months old and the evaluation is ongoing. I do not tell you this part to characterize David as a monster. I tell you because it is true and because accurate information is what this story requires. I want to tell you about the morning I understood that I had made the right decision. Emma was about 2 months old, and Ava was sitting on the floor of the living room looking at her baby sister in the specific, focused way that 3-year-olds look at things they find genuinely interesting. She reached out and touched Emma's hand. Emma wrapped her fingers around Ava's, and Ava looked at me with her father's eyes and said, "She likes me." I said, "She loves you." Ava said, "I love her too." She went back to looking at her sister with that focused attention. I sat on the living room floor with my daughters, and I thought about the Sunday evening at the kitchen table and the 9 words that had reorganized everything I understood about my marriage and my life and my future. I thought about what would have happened if I had not heard them as the information they were, if I had managed the wound quietly the way I had been managing quiet wounds for 5 years, if I had continued softening the lens and telling myself that what I was seeing was enough. I would have raised my daughters in a home where one of them, and then both of them, eventually understood that their father saw their existence as something less than what he had needed. I heard the 9 words.
I understood them for what they were. I built a way out while I was carrying Emma, and I am sitting on the floor of a home that is warm and completely ours, with 2 daughters who are going to grow up understanding that they were wanted completely, unconditionally, in the full and demanding and joyful sense of the word by at least one of the people who brought them into the world. That is enough. In fact, it's everything. Ava has her father's eyes and my laugh, and she uses them both freely in a house where she is the full measure of what was hoped for, not a consolation version of it. Emma arrived fierce and decided and has been telling me exactly what she needs since the moment she got here, and I intend to make sure she always knows that what she needs matters. I am 31 years old. I have 2 daughters. I have a consulting business that supports us. I have my mother and Kira, and a life that is genuinely mine in the complete sense of that phrase. I am not waiting for anything. I am already in the thing that mattered. The sentence at the kitchen table was the worst moment of my marriage. It was also the moment that made the rest of my life possible. I would not trade it for the version of me that continued not hearing what was true. If you are in a marriage where something has been said to you that you have been managing quietly instead of hearing clearly, this story is for you. Hear it clearly. What you do with what you hear is yours to decide, but hear it. That is my story. Drop your city in the comments. Hit subscribe. I will see you in the next one.